Now, this animation here works and doesn't look too bad, but we can also build it in a slightly different and typically better way. Instead of animating our padding like this here, we can also return a different value here in our builder. We can return a slide transition. And indeed, Flutter has many transition widgets built in. If you take a look, you, for example, also have a fade transition, you have a size transition to animate between two sizes for a widget, and a line transition to animate the position of a widget, a scale transition to scale a widget up or down, or, for example, a slide transition to animate the movement of a widget from one position to another, so to say. And for that, slide transition needs multiple parameters. For example, it needs the child that should be animated. In this case, it's still this child which we're outsourcing here, the grid view, so that this grid view is not unnecessarily re-evaluated. But that's the child that will be animated by slide transition in the end. Now, position also must be set, and that's actually not a number, but instead an animation that animates an offset. Now, what's that? Now, an animation in the end is what we get with help of animation controller. That's an animation in the end. An offset then is a special kind of value used by Flutter to describe the, amount of offset of an element from the actual position it would normally take. And to make this a bit clearer, let's simply start adding a value here. And the animation I will add is my animation controller, and on that controller you can call the built-in drive method. Now, this simply is a method that can be used to build an animation, as you can see, based on some other value. So in the end, it is a method that can be used to translate this animation between these two values, 0 and 1, to an animation between two other kinds of values. For example, between two offsets here, because here we need an animation over offsets, not an animation between two doubles, not an animation between 0 and 1. And drive simply allows us to translate our animation between 0 and 1 to an animation between two other values. For that, drive wants an animatable child. And such an animatable child can be built with Flutter's tween class. The tween class creates tween objects, and the name tween simply comes from the fact that this class and these objects are all about animating or describing the transition between, hence the name tween, two values. And for that, tween takes two values, as you might guess, begin and end. And now here we want to animate between two offsets, because position wants an animation over offset values. Such an offset can be created with Flutter's offset class, and offset simply takes two doubles, two numbers with decimal places. The first number describes the offset on the x-axis and the second number on the y-axis. So here, where we're talking about sliding some element, we're basically saying how much to the right or left on the x-axis and how much to the top or bottom on the y-axis should we start. And here you can enter values for both x and y between 0 and 1. And 0 simply means that there is no offset, and 1 means that there is an offset by 100% in the end. And here I want no offset on the x-axis initially, but I want some offset, let's say 30% offset on the y-axis, so that the content is pushed 30% down. And this can be a constant value, because even though we're going to animate, the starting point is constant. And the same is true for the end point. And here I want to have an offset of 0, 0, because I want to end at the actual position my grid view would normally have. So now these are the two values between which we want to animate, and now Flutter will figure out how to translate this animation between 0 and 1 to this translation between these two values. That is what Drive does in conjunction with Tween. And with that, if we now save this and reload, we will see that we again get a sliding animation, but now actually, thanks to us using slide transition, this animation behind the scenes is a bit more optimized, and it also gives us some extra features and capabilities. So which extra features do we get by using this way of animating the slide transition? Well, on this tween, we can call the animate method. And animate also returns an animation. Therefore, we can indeed replace animation controller drive with tween animate, since animate returns such an animation over an offset, which is exactly what position wants. But now animate takes an argument which we can use to get more control over how the animation is played back. To be precise, we can pass in a curved animation here, another object created with help of another class provided by Flutter. Now, curved animation in the end is a configuration object for creating such an animation with help of this animate method here. Curved animation then takes a parent, which is nothing else than our animation controller, so the thing that controls the animation, and it then takes a curve. And the curve here wants a curve value, but no worries, here you don't have to create one yourselves. Instead, there is a curves object or a curves class built into Flutter with a bunch of predefined animation curves. And these curves simply control how the transition between the begin and end state will be spread over the available animation time. So that we, for example, don't have a linear animation, but one where we start slow and end slow. So that we have some acceleration in the middle, but we end smoothly and start smoothly. And you can simply play around with these different curves to give your animations a more natural feel. That's the idea behind setting curves, and that's in the end the idea behind calling animate here and passing such a curved animation configuration object. It simply gives us more control over how the animation feels. If we save this and reload, you might see that now the animation looks a bit more natural, even though the difference, of course, is subtle. But that's another way of explicitly setting and controlling an animation, and you can, of course, now use this knowledge to animate all kinds of things in your Flutter app. But as you will learn over the next lectures, you often can also use implicit animations, which can make your life easier. Because with explicit animations, as you can see, you have quite a lot of setup work to do. With implicit animations, as you will see, you will have much less work to do. So let's take a look at those.